Keep your applause going for Richard Cardllo. Come on up, Richard.
My mother's name was Angelina, Little Angel. I always thought there was a little irony with that name for her because for most of her adult life, she was a pretty large woman. Most of the weight issues probably had to do with the fact that she had 9 children in a 20-year time span. I'm number 6. Probably had an awful lot to do with the fact as well that she was never that great at taking care of herself. She was one of the most loving, caring women I ever knew in my life. And yet she had this deep-seated sense of inadequacy, that no matter what she did or who she was, it just wasn't enough. She would end her days taking care of 9 children endlessly with this wailing chant, Maron, I do and do and do for you kids, and it's just never enough. My mother died in March of 1991. And about a month after we buried her, I realized I never took the time to find out how she really got her name. So I looked up her sister, my Aunt Jo, and for the first time ever, I got the true saga of the 2 little angels. It's October of 1921, and my grandparents have just landed on Ellis Island, coming from the little village of Rocca Seca, Dry Rock, in Italy. In tow, they're with their little daughter, Josephine, my Aunt Jo. My grandmother is very pregnant with her second child, and within 3 weeks of coming to this new country, she gives birth to her second daughter and christens that daughter Angelina. Angelina was the apple of everybody's eye. She was a symbol of all the hopes and dreams that people carried about life in a new world. My grandmother got pregnant very quickly again. And in about the 9th month of her pregnancy, Angelina becomes extremely ill with scarlet fever. And tragically, she dies. Heartbroken, my grandparents make the decision they're going to put the body back on a boat and send it back to Italy because they were going to move back there someday. And only 6 days after putting their dead daughter's body back on a boat to Italy, my grandmother gives birth to my mother and promptly names her Angelina. I'm not a big believer in armchair psychology, but there's got to be this connection between my mother's lifelong sense of inadequacy and having to live up to this sense of a phantasm, a ghost, a dead sister that she had never, ever met. A few years after my grandmother died, I met my partner, Peter, and about 5 years into our relationship, we started having real issues in our relationship. Pete was getting sicker and sicker with pneumonia. He was developing neuropathy. And the handwriting was kind of on the wall. He had buried 2 partners to AIDS in the 1980s, and he always lived his life as if he were positive. He just never got tested. So we both went for testing, and yes, he tested positive for HIV/AIDS. The doctor quickly sent him for medicines to stabilize his health, and then quickly sent both of us for counseling to Gay Men's Health Crisis so that we could learn to live as a serodiscordant, positive-negative couple. And I was just not a happy camper. Nothing was ever discordant in our relationship up to this point. I loved him so deeply and he loved me so deeply, and we took care of each other. This just wasn't fair. Thinking that his AIDS diagnosis was a death sentence, Peter wanted to travel. And the first place he wanted to go was Italy. And I agreed, but I said one caveat. We spend at least one day trying to find the burial site of Angelina #1. He said, fine. We go to Italy, having a great time. The day of the cemetery search comes, and Pete is not having a good day. He even offered to stay behind so that he didn't distract from the day, and I was stressed out. And I said, no way, you are staying with me every step of the way for this. So we go to the cemetery. A cemetery is no place to hang out when you're nauseous and you have diarrhea, but Pete was a trooper. And in a short amount of time, we found the gravesite. And I'm looking at the gravestone. Angelina Adelina Grimaldi, born 1921, died 1923. I get down to take some pictures. I walk around the grave, and Pete whispers, I'm going to go wait in the car. I said, don't you move. I need you here. And I'm getting more stressed out. I'm looking at the other gravestones or the family markers, looking at the scenes around me. And Pete says, we're going to go soon, right? And I exploded. Will you shut the fuck up? You're driving me crazy. We had never, ever raised our voices in anger one to the other. And just doing that then scared the bejesus out of the both of us. Pete always had the bigger heart. So we recommended we use some of those counseling techniques we learned. Get away from the site of the fight and ask each other 2 questions. What's going on? What do you need from me? And Pete let me go first. And through my tears, I told him, Pete, since you got your AIDS diagnosis, I am a wreck. I am just so afraid that whatever I do is going to be inadequate for you. I just feel if you get sicker, I'm going to do and do and do for you, and it's never going to be enough. Our gasps were simultaneous. In really eerie, powerful, strange, and real-time ways, I was channeling the spirits of the 2 Angelinas. I was playing out that age-old generational drama that affected everybody in my family, of thinking that you're never good enough, that you're never bad enough for other people. And then I realized I was dragging Peter along for the ride with this. We stayed there hugging each other for a while, got back in the car, drove back into the center of town in Roca Seca to find an open travel agency, and made the decision to postpone our flight back to the United States the next day. And we booked a 4-day excursion to the Isle of Capri. And on that magical spot, we were more than enough for each other. 6 years after this trip to Italy, Pete died. And I know what kept him and me going for so long was the love and support of family and friends. And I am confident we always had the protective care of 2 little angels. Thank you.